strengthen Maine's economy by focusing on education, leadership, and quality of place. On the web at mainecf.org.
The time is 10:02, and you are tuned to WERU-FM, 89.9 Blue Hill, 99.9 Bangor, and streaming online everywhere at weru.org. Talk of the Towns with your host, Ron Beard, is up next.
Good morning and welcome to Talk of the Towns here on WERU. We try to go beyond the headlines to make sense of the issues facing Maine communities, to share what works, to seek alternative solutions. Talk of the Towns is produced with support from Cooperative Extension, the major educational outreach program of the University of Maine with offices statewide. Cooperative Extension puts knowledge to work with the people of Maine, and like WERU, whose mission is to be a voice of many voices, operates out of a sense that everyone benefits when we share our knowledge, our experience, our concerns, our perspectives. We're about to practice the magic of community radio, in which those of us in the studio and you who are listening create a dialogue that we hope will be of benefit to our friends, our neighbors, and colleagues. I hope you'll stay with us for the next hour and Talk of the Towns. Well, we're all familiar with a typical business model that creates and sells products and services that we purchase to meet some need or desire. But what if the model were rethought to create a virtuous cycle connecting business, people, and the planet? This morning, we'll be talking with our guest, Jay Friedlander of College of Atlantic, and others to talk about this concept of an abundance cycle. And we're happy to welcome Jay Friedlander back. Jay, you're the Sharp McNally Chair of Green and Socially Responsible Business. That's a mouthful.
It is.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to that position.
So I've been at the College of the Atlantic for about 6 or 7 years now, and I came from a long, winding road of doing everything from the Peace Corps to running a natural and organic foods company to doing consulting with Fortune 100 companies. And what the college has allowed me to do is really both apply and put together new ideas about how can you use business as a lever of change and to create the world that you want to see.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you've done is to create what you call a hatchery, or the hatchery, kind of an incubator for some of those business ideas.
Yeah, we have students who are starting business as part of their education. You can come to College of the Atlantic and create for credit, and we've had students working in everything from biofuels to advocacy to the creative economy, and really using both their principles and the principles around creating a more abundant world to do this as part of their education and start up these enterprises.
Well, you brought with us one of the students from College of Atlantic who's probably got some association with the hatchery, Lisa Bjorke. Lisa, welcome to Talk of the Towns.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to College of Atlantic. You're now a graduate student, I understand.
Yes. I came here in 2009 as an undergrad from Sweden on a scholarship, and I did my four years working with Jay and many other of the great faculty and staff and students and the community, mainly focusing on organic resources and compost, but being all over with my interest of how to improve myself and my surrounding.
Well, we're going to come back to you in a few minutes to talk about your Watson Fellowship and then the work that you're doing now. Jay, I can recall my first assignment as a fledgling professor was to teach a basic course in economics, and the book that I used was something called Scarcity Challenged, and I think it comes out of the concept that our economic systems are supposed to help us with scarce resources and distribute those resources in some way, and yet you've come up with the idea of abundance, kind of the opposite notion. Tell us a little about that kind of that path.
Sure. Well, there's a reason they call economics the dismal science, and my background is one of entrepreneurship, where you take the opposite view, and you're looking for opportunities in the world and things that unrecognized resources, unrecognized value, and figuring out how to use them. And of course, business and economics take very different views of the world. Economics looks at broad trends and what's happening, and in business, it's how do you apply this? How do you make it happen? And I think for me, the concept of abundance is really about how do you improve the community, improve the environment, and improve the bottom line and make the business more robust. And doing all those things together. And when you do that and you have that new perspective, you see all kinds of new opportunities that other people have missed. And in doing so, that helps create a more abundant world.
So some people's concept of business is narrower in that the business is in they're producing something, but they're also producing a profit for the owners or the stockholders, whatever. You've expanded that to say that there might be some real benefit to the community and to the planet.
Yeah, and what they're finding out is that the companies that are on the cutting edge and understand where things are going are using these new models and are actually more profitable. They're saving costs. They're reducing their risk profile, and they have all of these other benefits. And because it's a more complex way to operate where you, let's say, help solve a problem in the community or help improve the environment, you create a more robust competitive advantage. And so you have companies out there, big, large publicly traded companies like Whole Foods, who is one of the most profitable companies in their sector. And you have others from, GE and Unilever, all the way down to startup companies, people like Airbnb, who are using these kinds of new models to create abundance for not only for their shareholders, but also for the communities they operate in.
So is it in their genes that they think differently about this, or have they learned this technique, or have they stumbled on it, do you suppose?
I mean, I think it's a whole bunch of different things. When this stuff originally started really coming to the fore I'd say in the 80s and 90s, people were starting to conceptualize things a little bit differently and saying things like, well, what if you started looking at waste as a resource? Or what if you had an economy that instead of where you bought products, you actually shared resources when you need them? So like the whole sharing economy with companies like Airbnb and Zipcar. And there have been phenomenal gains. When you hear about GE talk about their Eco-Imagination program and helping people do more with less resources, they have saved their customers tons of money, and they've also made tons of money. If you go back to the early days of the Industrial Revolution, when you had one person doing the work of 100. Now we're starting to do that with energy and other areas, and you can look at something as simple as a light bulb when you're going from incandescent to a CFL light bulb to an LED, all of which are using energy much, much more efficiently.
So you're seeing it as somewhat of a natural progression of the business model to expand who they think about, or what they think about as they go into business.
Yeah, and part of this is also facing up to the realities of the world, in that there are fewer resources, and this going back to that notion of scarcity. And so you have to find new ways to operate. But a lot of this also is coming out of an ethos. Your perspective and how you see the world guides a lot, and the models you're using guide the decisions that you make. So if you're trying to say, well, wait a minute, I want to do these things, but I also care about the environment, or I care about solving social issues, and our understanding of those has gotten much deeper over time and will continue to progress, that you're going to come up with new models. Another great example of this is there's a woman, Zhang Yin, who came over to the U.S. and was looking for business opportunities, and she noticed that we were throwing out a ton of cardboard. And she got that cardboard and put it in containers and shipped it back to China, and they made it into boxes, and then they shipped it back to us, and as around the products they were selling. She's now the richest woman in China, and so she took something that was garbage to us, and seen as just waste, and really used that to create a whole new opportunity. And that's happening all across the economy today with companies like that, or concepts like Kickstarter, where you have people crowdfunding different ventures. And today, when Kickstarter started up, about 8 or 9 years ago, it was seen as this odd, quirky little concept. And today, they've provided over $1 billion in funding for startup enterprises.
So they, in some ways, they're finding new paths to substitute for the old paths of getting, in that case, money to people. But in other cases, it's taking waste and making a product out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is about redefining the direction of the economy. And if you look at this, you're redefining these pathways and you're maximizing the gains you can have for business, the environment, and society. If you look at the evolution of the economy, it goes through these phases. So we started out as an agricultural economy and then went to industrial and then the information age. And there's many people who think we're moving into this age of abundance or sustainability where you really have to operate within a different set of parameters. And you have to be thinking about these issues, and that the companies that don't think about these issues, the same thing's going to happen to them that all the other companies that miss the change of context in the economy. They're going to go away, and they'll be replaced by a whole new set of folks who have figured out new ways of finding value that people didn't know that they didn't know that they existed before.
So is that happening as we think about energy as well? I think of the typical energy companies using fossil fuels. They must be thinking, well, there's an end to this.
Yeah, and there's huge risks. You know, on the publicly traded markets, the companies are valued based on a lot of intangible factors, and 70 to 80% of their value is made up of things that are intangible. You can't quantify them on a balance sheet like assets owned. So, and you can see that as people have more risk involved in their portfolio from carbon or other things, their valuations are going down. And you have other companies, you know, you look at companies like Tesla, right, who's doing electric cars, and their valuations are so much higher because people see that that's where the future is going.
So they're looking at these values as potential versus the risk that's inherent in taking the last little bit of oil out of the ground.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Jay, as you begin to work with students, what kinds of things? What are the things that they bring to your quest? You've mentioned some ideas, but where do they start? Do they start with ideas?
Well, you know, you start from a whole number of different areas, especially at College of the Atlantic, where it's interdisciplinary. So students are coming at things from many different areas. And actually, one project that Lisa was involved in which started in a class that's about solving social problems. And they were interested in solving the problem of food waste on MDI. And so they had on their team Lisa, who was extremely interested in composting. They had another person who was interested in fermentation, specifically brewing beer. Mm-hmm. They had another person who was a community organizer, and there was another person on that team who was looking at wood as a resource. And they were trying to solve this problem of what do you do with all this food waste that we're sending off the island to be burned? And lettuce doesn't make a great fuel. You know, it's mostly water. And so how can we use this stuff that we're paying to have it taken away as a resource? And they came up with this idea of gourmet butanol, where you're turning the food waste into biofuel. And the person who was leading that team, Nick Harris, is now getting his PhD at Berkeley to continue working on that process.
Lisa, what do you remember about that the excitement of that project? What do you recall? That was 2 or 3, 4 years ago?
Yeah, that was a long. It feels like a long time now. But it was to bring together the issues on the surface that we thought like things that did not make sense. Like we were throwing away food. Either we need to reduce it, but if it's there, how can we use it and take that what first looked like an issue and then turn it around and see it as an opportunity, and going through the like process of a vision to actually like how would this work? If we have this idea, what are the steps from where we are now? And it took much longer than what we thought, of course. And Nick is now in grad school, still working on it. So for me as a second year student, it was the most important experience of daring to believe in a vision and then trying to go for it and going through that process with the help of faculty and a community supporting. It was transformative and taught me how hard it is to get things done, but also how much fun, and that's what I want to spend my life doing.
That's great.
Trying to solve issues, yeah.
That's great. Well, I just want to remind listeners they're tuned to Talk of the Towns. In our studios this morning are Lisa Bjorke, who's a graduate student. You've just heard from her, and Jay Friedlander, who's the Sharp McNally Chair of Green and Socially Responsible Business at College of the Atlantic. We'll open up our phone lines for you to participate in just a while, but I want to remind you that this is the Funathon edition of Talk of the Towns, and we urge you to call in with your pledge. If you do, call 1-800-643-6273. We'll enter you into a drawing for This Changes Everything, Capitalism and versus Climate by Naomi Klein, a really wonderful book, and that drawing will happen on Friday afternoon at 5. So if you do call with your pledge, your name will be entered for the drawing of that book. 1-800-643-6273. As we return to our conversation here, we're talking about abundance and abundance as a new lens for developing sustainable business. Jay, as I recall, at College Atlantic, there were some skeptics within the college who wondered, well, business, they're the enemy. Business has sacrificed the planet, so to speak, and why would we want to teach business skills at College Atlantic? But you kind of came in and began to work with that concept. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. And I think that was when the college was founded, that was a very common view. I mean, business, and I still think today, business is a cause of huge problems around the world and may be the agent of destruction. But if you stop for a moment and say, well, wait, is there another side to that? You really, and you kind of unpack it, what you see is that business is one of the most ubiquitous activities on the planet, if not the most ubiquitous activity. And by changing the way you do business, you can have enormous knock-on effects. Essentially, it's the biggest lever out there.
Right.
So how can you strive to have social and environmental change without including business? It just doesn't make sense. So And so if you change the way that business is done, you can have these remarkable positive effects. And for me, I really saw this in the Peace Corps, where I was in Mauritania in West Africa, where they had abolished slavery in the 1980s. Now, enslaving people for your enrichment is about the worst of business. But then you would also see that these same groups that had been enslaved, they had gotten together and formed women's cooperatives, and they could suddenly afford nutrition to feed their kids. They could afford education, their social standing increase, and had all these positive benefits. And so I knew when I got out of the Peace Corps, that was what I wanted to do, was do business that way. And I think they've seen at the college and other places that if you change what is happening underneath the system with something like business, you can have tremendous positive consequences.
And students have kind of picked up on that since you kind of became this chair of green and socially responsible business.
Yeah, I would say the students were pushing for it.
Okay.
And so when I arrived, I think I was meeting pent-up demand because, like many things, the students are far ahead of everybody else on where we need to be going.
Sure.
And so they were really pushing to have someone to help them do these things. And we've had students do tremendous work. I talked about Gourmet Butanol, but there are numerous other stories I could go into as well.
Well, in a moment, we're going to be talking with Steve Schaefer from Black Dinah Chocolatiers. We'll be reaching him by phone. But Jay, earlier in your career, you worked with something I believe called Au Naturals.
Yes.
And tell us about that concept and what you kind of bring from that experience into your present work.
Sure. That was a natural and organic food startup. And actually, when I was working at Au Naturals and looking around at what has happened, there was this huge growth that continues today in the natural and organic food sector. And I was trying to figure out, and at the time I was also teaching courses on sustainable business. And so I was trying to figure out, how do you take these kinds of principles and how are companies making them work, and what is a model that people can use as an alternative that's still grounded in business strategy but brings in these other concepts. And so when I was with Au Naturals, those ideas were really formed, and the early stages of the abundance cycle came about.
And Au Naturals was really, as I experienced it, because I would go to the one in, Southern Maine in Falmouth.
Yeah.
It was a place where you could go. You knew you were going to get a consistently quality meal, but it was going to be served almost McDonald's style. It was fast food, but it was really quality. That
was the idea.
Concept?
It was quick service, but all the ingredients were natural, local, wild, or organic. And so there was really high quality food that was served quickly. And now after being in business about 10 years, Au Naturals is no more. And I think one thing here that I want to make perfectly clear is that you still have, even with a company that's practicing abundance, you still have all the normal risks that you have with any company. And you still have to operate well and be able to perform the tasks that you're performing. So this is not a panacea from a business perspective. You still have all those risks, but when it's done and done well, it can lead to enormous opportunities.
And so one of the courses that you taught was one that was called Sustainable Strategies, I understand, and,
Yes.
and Steve and Kate Schaefer were members of that class, is that right?
Yeah, they were in that class. We consult for companies.
Okay.
So students take the theory of abundance and sustainability, and they apply that to a company. And so they were one of the companies we were consulting for as part of that class.
I'm happy to welcome Steve Schaefer to Talk of the Towns. Welcome to our program, Steve. You're calling from the road as you head to southern Maine, I understand. Steve, are you there? No, we've lost Steve, so we'll try to get him back. Tell us a little bit more about that process of students kind of contracting or consulting with businesses.
Sure, and it goes back to your earlier question of how do we engage with students, and what we do is we want to take theory and action and combine them together. So having the passion without the skills is somewhat of an empty set. And so part of this process is we want them to consult with companies and see, okay, so they have lots of exciting ideas, but what does it take to implement this? What do you do when, with an entrepreneur who's trying to make payroll and still trying to apply these concepts, and where are the points of tension? And generally what that does is just increases the learning for everyone.
So now I think we've got Steve Schaefer back. Welcome to Talk of the Town, Steve.
Thank you. Well, glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about, I think many of our listeners will be familiar with Black Dinah Chocolatiers, but give us the thumbnail sketch if you would.
Yeah, we started in 2007. At the time, we had been moved out to Idaho, and I was doing construction, and Kate, my wife, was working at the keeper's house at the inn, and housing's real hard to find out there, and so we had finally found a place that was permanent. And as soon as we moved into the place, she found out that her employers were retiring, and we had just located, and we didn't want to move, so we had to think about what Kate was going to do. So we spent a winter just brainstorming, and Kate had been interested in chocolate for a number of years and started experimenting with different recipes, and we sat down and worked out a business plan and opened a little cafe on the side of our house to try and get the product out there, and it grew year by year, and and we're now in the process of setting up a facility down in Westbrook to meet demand, because it's very difficult to do production on a remote island.
That's right. You've got transportation problems among them.
And we've got weather that we're always fighting,
and this has got to be one of the 3 or 4 busiest times of year for you. Valentine's Day coming up tomorrow.
Yes. Well, our shipping is done on that level. We have a store in Blue Hill that is very busy, and I'm down in Westbrook doing a little pop-up at our new location for just trying to get our product to more people, which has always been that's the biggest challenge. One of the biggest challenges. There's a couple of challenges, but that's one of them.
And so you worked with Jay Friedlander, who's here in the studio, in the Sustainable Strategies course. What was that like? What did you learn in that process?
I think that it's one of the, I was listening to the beginning of this conversation, and it's interesting because out of the scarcity comes abundance. And moving out to the island and being part of that community out there, you really get to see how the impact that a business has on a community, which you don't necessarily see in smaller communities. And so when I still see this on a day-to-day basis, I see so many opportunities out there that could benefit the community, that would be profitable, that would generate jobs by just creating a business around stuff. But what is a hard part in that is that the community has to be ready for it. And so there's all these different factors that are involved, as that if you're going to offer something, the people have to be ready for it, or how do you get them to accept it? So it was really a lot about understanding how the community and scarcity can turn into abundance, and the challenge with turning it into that, switching people's perception of it and saying, oh, we do have a lot here. It's not, looking at something as blowdown. For us, that's a huge problem, a lot of trees. Well, what do you do with that? How do you turn it into something that is, instead of a pain to deal with, as to how does it could you turn it into something that makes it useful for the island?
So it seems like what you're saying is that any entrepreneur could kind of be very observant about what's going on in their community, look at the things that are in some ways causing problems, and then figure out a way to turn that into a profit-making business.
Exactly. And it was one of the things when we were first moved out there, part of the reason the cafe came about was we heard people lamenting the fact that the store had traditionally had a little space for people to come and meet, and the store had changed to the point where they didn't have that anymore. And they were like, well, there's no place for anybody on the island to meet. I was like, all right, well, let's do a little cafe where people can come and sit down and meet. It was really interesting to see all of a sudden, because there was never this opportunity before, in a sense, we had people that normally, it's an island during the summertime with 350 people, that really never had the chance to communicate with each other on a different level. It was always either work-related, because if the summer community comes out and they need stuff done, they were communicating with the year-rounders for, I need this job done or this job done. And all of a sudden they come into the cafe and they see them in a different, their relationship has all of a sudden changed. They're both customers, which is an equal relationship, and they'd have conversations that they never had before, and relationships would start striking up. So it was really interesting to see, and I don't think you'd see that those little nuances that you lose in a bigger city. And I think, in islands are perfect places to start to have people start looking at issues and say, oh, I could turn this into a business, and then taking it onto the mainland because you've worked out a lot of the minor details and understanding of, oh, this is what is needed, and you can really drive it home in a larger sense.
So you were as Black Donna Chocolatiers got to a point where you were developing a customer base, you decided to move production facilities to an area that probably has some of that larger context down there in Westbrook. What led to that? Was it that you were getting big enough so that you really needed to do that?
There's a lot of things that led to it. One is, for us to get product to the to UPS it, we'd have to take it down to the mail boat, and then it would be taken over on the mail boat, and so everything takes three or four more times as much labor to get something accomplished. We were also running into labor resources. Human resources were an issue. There was not enough people on the island to do what we need to do. You need a certain temperament and talent to be able to do certain positions, which was what Kate does. And there's nobody to really, that Kate could train to do that. And we also wanted a larger base to work from and make things easier for us. We really want to get Kate back into producing new product, which is really what her strength is, as opposed to day-to-day operations.
But you've done very well in terms of attracting kind of national, international attention. One through an award that your product won very recently, and I believe that Martha Stewart has been quite interested in your product. So you've gotten the recognition, and now you need the production facilities to meet that demand.
Correct. We've been very fortunate in getting a lot of press, but also, it's taking what's presented to us. The product that won the national recognition was the Cassis de Resistance, which won a Good Food Awards. And the requirement is that it has to be produced in a certain way, and that the product has to be local. We've always been concerned with what we can get locally. And right down the road, somebody was growing black currants, and we were able to purchase them from them, and Kate was able to turn that into a truffle. So that's even more, it's a point of pride for us to be able to grab something from the island and create something that good. And it's a credit to Kate's talent also.
We're sorry that you both couldn't be with us to share that story.
Yeah, me too. But this is good too.
And anything that you particularly remember from the course that you connected with J.A. Friedlander in terms of the sustainable strategies? What did you learn out of that process?
Well, for me, there's a lot of things, but one of the things that was most impressive was to see the students responding with, as Jay said earlier, they're just so eager to take these ideas and put them out there in the world. For me, it's where our location is so remote, I'm not in contact with that as much. And so all of a sudden, seeing people who are eager to say, "Look, these are new things we want to check out, we want to figure out," and it's that entrepreneurship that is really great to see. People being eager about something, and it's not on all levels. It seems like they were grasping a wider range of possibilities than I had previously.
Jay, anything to add to that in terms of what you saw happening when Steve and Kate were connected to the hatchery?
Yeah, well, in the course, I think there was a two-part process. And so the first part was in going on skill building and really looking at what was happening strategically within the business and where are there areas of strength with Black Dyna. And then the second part, what the students were doing was taking various tactics and various concepts from the abundance cycle and tactics that other folks were using and looking at the business and trying to help them both evaluate. I think one of the things, if I remember correctly, Steve, is at the time you all were still in the process of evaluating the move to Portland, and so they analyzed the business and said, here are some different ways that you could do things that will both impact you positively from a business, but as well as improve your social and environmental impacts.
Yep. And one of the things they had talked about different assortments. One of the ones was having ones just island based and so forth, which was really good for me to see that it is important. What was important to people, a younger generation, to see how they evaluate a product. From my perspective, say, oh, okay, this is important to them. It's not just something that I'm thinking or hoping is true. They're reflecting that as, yeah, it does make a difference to us, and we would spend the money to purchase it.
Great. Well, Steve, thanks so much for taking time to be with us here on Talk of the Towns, and best of luck to you and Kate with Black Dyna Chocolatiers.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that was Steve Schaefer of Black Dyna Chocolatiers. You're tuned to Talk of the Towns here on WERU. We're talking about abundance as a new lens for developing sustainable business. In the studio with us are Jay Friedlander, the Sharp McNally Chair of Green and Socially Responsible Business at College of Atlantic, and Lisa Bjorke, who is a graduate student at College of Atlantic. We're going to come to her in just a moment, but I want to remind you that this is Funathon, and we're always glad to get your pledges of support by phone or by online. If you're doing that by phone, 1-800-643-6273, and your name will be entered into a drawing for This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus Climate by Naomi Klein. That drawing will be happening on Friday at 5 o'clock, so get your name into the watering can for that giveaway. Also, if you've got comments or questions or would like to share your own experience, please give us a call at 1-866-625-9378. That's 866-625-9378. Well, Lisa, I was recently reading my Utne magazine, and Eric Utne, who's the originator or founder of Utne, quoted John Gardner, who some folks may remember as the founder of Common Cause. And Gardner said, "This is the time of breathtaking opportunities disguised as unsolvable problems." And it strikes me as our whole concept of waste is one of those opportunities that describes as a problem. Tell us a little about your interest in waste and your Watson Fellowship that provided a chance after college to travel around the world. I think you were looking at people's perceptions of waste and composting in particular. But tell us how you got interested in the topic of waste.
Yeah, as an honest, I saw waste as a human conception, and I still do, and it hit me that, like, in nature, if you want to separate us from nature in a way for us a second, in nature there is no concept of a waste.
Right.
Like, beauty is in the viewer's eyes, and I think waste is in the viewer's eyes as well. That we decide due to social values or economical structures and our beliefs, what is waste. And I think that is hurting us and is hurting the environment by deciding that some resource is waste just because I don't value it right now. So
when you say there's no waste in nature, if something breaks down, it becomes part of something else.
Exactly. It builds up and breaks down on many different time scales. But we're all living within one Earth, and we need to be using those resources here. And it might not be something might not be useful for me at a particular instant, but it will be useful for someone else or for something else to then turn it into a resource for me again, such as food waste, which I said, like, I don't want to eat it anymore. It has gone bad, or it's the peel. But if I give it to the soil, it will turn it into compost that then can be turned into food that I can eat again. And I really wanted to take that on another level and go out in the world and understand how different people and places view and look at the resources and what they consider to be a waste or value and why and how. So it's really like I see the opportunity not really under the trash pile, but the trash pile itself. Like that is the value.
Right. So what did you find when you went around? Where are some of the memorable places that you investigated how people think about waste around the world?
Oh, I went to Germany for 3 months, and where they actually there's a law that no organic resources such as food can be put into a landfill or be thrown away as waste or burnt. So they actually compost or turn it into methane, everything as a law. And it has produced so much business opportunities and jobs, and made people have a new whole industry of turning back what people before saw as waste into a resource again. And then I went to India and learned about the huge informal recycling sector there, formerly called trash pickers, who are building up life and sending their kids to school by seeing value in things that other people throw away. And it taught me a lot about that everything is a resource depending on how you look at it, and it's more that they're wasteful behaviors more than things. And then I went to China for 3 months, and it was a really amazing experience, teaching me a lot about just scale. I come from a country who are 9 million people, and I was living in a city with 27 million people. So that really brought to me like the scale of, if we see things as waste and we're 27 million, that's going to be a lot of lost opportunities right there. And I think my time, and after that I went to Japan and learned about their recycling and waste management there, and how they're trying to really rethink it as not waste management but as a resource management. And that was brought me back here, because I realized that it's us here in the Western world or in the so-called developed world who needs to develop the most, because of the rest of the world wants to become like us. So we have to really change and not see things as waste but as as a resource. And I want to come back and learn more about how I can really get practical in that viewpoint.
So what are you doing as a graduate student? You're kind of learning some of the solid waste systems that are existing now and what we're doing with so-called waste?
Yes, so I came back in the fall, and as a project, as a volunteer, as a tourist, and I did a waste audit or a discarded resource audit, where we collected everything that the campus throw away during a week, all the compost, all the recycling, everything, and we audited it and saw what is it, how much is placed in the wrong bins, how like much, and then we made an exhibition about it. So everything was in one tent and really rethinking about like what are these things that we don't value and why don't we value them, and how could we put them into a process of a circular economy or like a way of living. And then I came back now in the winter as a student, and I'm working with the school to hopefully make it a zero waste school or
zero waste school.
Yeah, and that's my vision and hope, and that's what I'm hoping to work for, implement some strategies of doing so.
So I went to that tent.
Yeah,
when
you did.
Finished that project, and it struck me as there's another law of nature that you're probably familiar with. There's no such thing as a way in nature, and you are bringing all of the so-called waste, or things that were thrown away, to one place, and allowing people to look at that was an eye-opener. We suddenly saw that the things we had hidden away in the trash bag or wherever were all of a sudden visible. And what do you think people's reactions were? What did you hear from students and faculty and staff at College of Atlantic when you had everything assembled in one place?
Yeah, a lot of positiveness, actually, that like, oh my gosh, I did not know that like these things are thrown away, and like positive in like is positive, like it's actually not gonna be it could be not waste if I just rethought it. So it was this optimism of like, if we just rethink and redesign and revalue is possible, because I think before it was kind of a taboo of not thinking about the waste, and by bringing it into the room and making art and useful things out of it, people are more comfortable thinking about it, and it's not just when I throw something away, it's gone. It's like, oh my gosh, I can keep on to this, or do I really actually need this thing right now? So it's I think it was empowering for many of us to actually go through these trash bags and see what were in them.
You were using gloves when you did that, though.
Yes, we did.
I did. We do have a phone call. I'll list our phone numbers one more time. If you'd like to share your experience, your insights, or your questions, give us a call at 1-866-625-9378. We do have a call from Brooklyn. Go ahead with your question or comment, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and congratulations. This is such a wonderful program, and it's so encouraging for me to hear. Just having come back myself from a really short trip to Norway, where I never have been before, but I saw there a prototype of a place where there is like zero waste, even as far as the people of the country go. The people, and if you take this to its social extension, which is what we're working on through working with our material waste. We're also working with the social correlative to that there's really no wasted people either, and that every person is a resource and not a liability, and you can't throw people away.
That's great.
I just was seeing this embodied in this a beautiful statue they have in Norway, where the state is this huge, towering, beautiful woman, and the people are represented by a man who's much smaller, standing on a little podium next to the woman, and she's protecting him and encircling him like the state might do for its people if they were really one and the same organism, which is the truth of it. And to begin to see that even in a material way is maybe how we can begin to work toward that ourselves. So I'm really encouraged by the program. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for your call this morning. 1-866-625-9378. Yeah, I think that's a great concept. There's no wasted people either, Jay.
Yeah, and I think that's what people are finding, and companies and organizations are finding, is looking at what are the strengths of people and how can you help them be their best on the. And I think that if you go back to the waste issue, I mean, the opportunities here are tremendous. If you look at everything that's dug up, produced, 99% of that is considered waste after 6 months. So only less than 1% of those things are still in use after 6 months. And Lisa's concept of bringing College of the Atlantic to zero waste may sound a little bit out there, but she has some great stories from large companies and cities as well who are striving for the same thing. So this is something that happening here and now, and the people who are on the front end of this are the ones who will really be capturing the opportunity. But maybe, Lisa, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the companies.
Let's take a phone call first and then come back to that. We have Lindy from Southwest Harbor. Go ahead with your question or comment, please.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. A wonderful program. I have just a question for Lisa. So the guilt when I go to the recycle center is horrible. And so I'm really glad to be inspired more to recycle even further. But, for instance, what would you do? I have a fan that's broken, not working, and I'm not putting it anywhere. I'm just shoveling it around my apartment, and for fear of what am I going to do with it? So what would a zero waste program do with a fan? And thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great question, and put us right on the spot. Thanks for that call this morning. So that's a pretty typical kind of thing.
Yeah.
People go to their recycling center and they feel a little bit badly about putting it, but at least they're recycling it, so they feel good about that. But then there are some things that don't feel like they could go into the recycling program.
Yeah. So I learned in India by an organization called Shintan about the 12 R's. Instead of going from the 3, reduce, reuse, recycle, they put recycle at the bottom of the 12 R's. And one of them is repair or remake and rethink. And I think this is a very, very great example of where you're standing there with our broken laptop or our broken fan. And I think the first thing is, can we repair it? Is there anyone out there who is willing and can to repair it? And if not, why not? And is there a way that we can come together and fix the things that we do have and that we have a need for, so it's become more convenient and a better way for the community to repair something and make a job opportunity from that, than to just toss it away and then buy something else that often comes from China.
Well, I read in the newspaper that our shared town of Bar Harbor is actually rethinking their recycling center, and one of the things they want to do is to create a space for people to put things that are still usable, might be like this broken fan, that people can then take away. So there's an exchange going on. Some people's trash is somebody else's treasure, and we don't allow for that too much. Used to be you could go to the dump and you could pick the dump. They don't allow you to do that anymore. So yes, great concept. So Jay, you were asking Lisa another question in terms of this concept. I think of what do we do with all of the things that we're producing? Yeah,
well, and Lisa has shared some examples with me of how this is happening, not only at the scale of College of the Atlantic, but with giant multinational corporations that are striving for zero waste in large urban areas. So I don't know if you wanted to talk a little about that. So
it came out recently that Unilever, which is a giant production company for a lot of products, they have become zero waste in their production. So they're sending nothing to a landfill or to be burnt for energy. So they're actually having a closed cycle in their production facilities and saving a lot of $200 million on this, which is pretty impressive.
And Unilever produces everything.
Yes, they do. And they want to go. They've gone on all their large production facilities, which is very exciting, and it shows that it's possible on a personal and on a big level if you just restructure and rethink of how you value things. And then there's like a city like San Francisco who reached their 75% goal of diversion. So they're actually now recycling and composting 80% of the things that they discard of, and that's pretty impressive.
And where are normal communities or average communities? Bar Harbor I think it prides itself at something like 60% or something like that. Where other communities might be on that scale. Mm-hmm. Do you happen to know where other communities are on that scale? If San Francisco is 80%?
Yeah. So most community are much lower because we don't take away the food waste from the waste stream, and that's the largest part for many places. So if you can divert food waste, you are already up at 60% without maybe even recycling.
So at home, a lot of food waste we can compost at home. At the municipal level, Jay, that's where your butanol students came in. They were thinking about, can we figure out how to get to restaurants and other establishments that have a fair amount of food waste and use that some way?
Yeah, well, and the beauty of using waste is, from a business point of view, your input is zero, or people are even paying you to haul it away.
Right.
And so you have companies who are creating compost and using the remnants from food production facilities and creating soil that can then be sold. So your inputs are zero. You're creating a product you can sell, and so that's a really good business model. And look no farther than biofuel, where people are harvesting French fry grease to make biofuel. And now, the grease was at one point people were getting paid to take it away, and now it's got real value, so much so that they have to lock it up to prevent people from stealing it.
Right.
I mean, so that'll be a wonderful day.
So as you think about the average business who might not have been kind of connected, what are the ways that you could intrigue them to begin to look at themselves and say, how could we do things differently?
Sure. Well, part of the abundance cycle, we've gotten rid of the term waste entirely and just thinking about it as unsold production, right? So part of this is the mindset shift that Lisa's talking about. But this is, in every business, you're creating products that you want to sell. And everything that you're wasting is stuff you're producing, but you're just not selling. And when you start thinking of it as unsold production, people say, well, wait a minute, is there value there? What can we do with this? Is there a market for this? Might someone else use this as an input? Or could we do something like Yang Zin did and produce a new product that people are going to use? And there are lots of companies that are exploring this. There's one company in New Zealand called Lanzatech, and they're trying to harvest the chemicals out of emissions. And so then they can take those chemicals and resell them back into the marketplace.
Emissions from
smokestacks.
Because they're increasingly smokestacks have scrubbers in them that remove those things, but they haven't necessarily found a product.
Right, or it's seen as a liability, or you have to pay for the offsets. And so again, it's about not just thinking this is something we have to get rid of, but what can we do with this valuable resource that we're creating?
Right. So as we begin to wrap up the hour, Lisa, are there lessons that you think businesses ought to be thinking about, not only in terms of waste, but this notion of sustainability? Are there things that you'd like to see people think about as they either go into business or they reevaluate their business?
I think the first step is always take a step back and reflect, make an audit of what you have, and then be where would I like to be, and that's going to be different for whatever business you are doing, a service or a production business. But to understand what you're doing right now and embrace that, and then being like, what are the low hanging fruit of actually making more valuable things, or to reduce a cost, such as like pickup of like trash. Is there a way that I could compost or take food and sell it to like pigs or something else, and then move on from there, and to not be afraid of having a vision of I would like to have no waste, and realize that it will take a while to get there, but you have to be taking the first step. And I think one of the R's that I like the most out of them,
the 12 R's,
ones are reach out, is to be able to be talking with with each other and learning and asking, and there are a lot of great ideas and people doing amazing things, and we just need to learn about them. So relearn is also another R.
Great, wonderful. 12 R's. We'll have to learn more about that. Jay, what would you add to that? What could businesses be thinking about?
Yeah, when we look at abundance, this whole issue of waste that we've been talking about is one of about a dozen different tactics that people are using. So we've just barely scratched the surface. And if I may, one thing I'd suggest people to go on to abundancecycle.com if they want to see the model and how it works. But there are things from the sharing economy where people are again taking resources that are just sitting around like a spare room or a car and sharing those with people. It's another form of waste. But there's a whole lot more that people could be doing to create abundance for their enterprise, for their local community, and for the environment. And so waste is one of the big opportunities, but there's lots more out there. So we're just barely scratching the surface.
So abundance.com?
Abundancecycle.com.
Abundancecycle.com. Well, this has been a great hour, and it's gone too fast. But I want to thank both of you for helping us think about the abundance cycle and how businesses and communities are beginning to use that. We've come to that time when I want to remind listeners that this program was produced with support from Cooperative Extension and the Hancock County Extension Association. With offices in each county, Cooperative Extension is the major educational outreach program of the University of Maine. Our radio collaboration with WERU began in 1990 and continues with your support. Join us from 10 to 11 on the second Friday of each month. You'll note that the fourth Friday of each month is now taken up by my colleague Natalie Springle, who is doing a program, a wonderful program called Coastal Conversations. And they're looking at issues facing Maine coastal communities through a dialogue with people who live, work, and play along our coast. So tune in on the fourth Friday of each month for Coastal Conversations. Our theme music is a medley from Coronach on a Balmain House Highland music recording. Thanks again to our guests here at Talk of the Towns this morning. We had Jay Friedlander, who is the Sharp McNally Chair of Green and Socially Responsible Business at College Atlantic, along with graduate student Lisa Bjerke. We also heard from Steve Schaefer from Black Dinah Chocolatiers out on Isla Ho. Thanks to our underwriters, thanks to Amy Browne for engineering our program, and stay tuned for On the Wing with Joel Raymond. This is Ron Beard, your host for Talk of Towns, wishing you a good morning and reminding you to pledge by calling 1-800-643-6273.
Support for WERU comes from the